helping you with Acorn and RISC computing.
Okay, so yeah, it's been a busy few weeks. I've got quite a lot to get through today, and I hope I don't bore you too much. So what I'm going to be showing today is a variety of new hardware products that Arcomp Interactive has been working on, and with a few digressions into some software products as we go. I'll be talking quite a lot today about two technologies that you may not be familiar with. One is called eMMC, and the other is NVMe. I'll just explain to what these weird abbreviations mean, and that way when we get to them in the talk, you'll have some idea what I'm talking about. eMMC is like the flash chips on a solid-state disk that you're familiar with in many computers these days. Instead of being connected, say, by SATA or what have you, eMMC chips are a single chip that are designed to be used as complete storage drives in sort of consumer electronics. Typically, they have the sort of performance profile of a main system drive for use in a sort of cheap, affordable PC or something like that, but are small enough that the entire module is about the size of your thumbnail. eMMC works on the same I/O bus as an SD card, but they're designed for situations like in industry and what have you, where you need a much more reliable, robust storage medium. So that's eMMC. It's faster, it's more robust, more reliable than things like SD cards. The second technology I'm going to mention will be NVMe. This is a next-generation storage technology that goes way beyond SATA or anything like that. If you buy a expensive PC these days, or even a medium PC these days, if it's worth its salt, it's going to have an NVMe system drive. They're basically little circuit boards, solid-state disks that live entirely on the PCI Express bus for maximum throughput. So, in the PC land, you can actually get sort of thousands and thousands of megabytes a second. I think I read in a press release this week, somebody's got an NVMe drive running at 12,000 megabytes a second, which is kind of insane. When you consider that SATA is running at sort of a low number of hundreds of megabytes a second, when you're talking about 12,000 megabytes a second, that's insane. So NVMe are these really high-performance, directly connected storage drives from the high end of the market. But they're still actually remarkably affordable. I was able to buy a 128 gigabyte NVMe drive last week from Amazon for less than £25. So, super high performance, but not necessarily bank-breaking. So those are two technologies that I'm going to be referencing in the talk, so when they come up, you now know. I'm going to start with the ROCC chip RK3399. This is a ARM-based system on a chip that powers the Pinebook Pro, which I will cover later in the talk anyway. The Pinebook Pro is basically the best ARM-powered laptop available that we could possibly run RISC on. And at its heart is the RK3399 processor. Essentially, if you think about something like a Pi 4, it's quite similar, but it's basically a Pi 4 on steroids. The main difference being that it brings a lot of the functionality that requires extra chips on a Pi 4 into the processor. So you've got things like the USB 3 controller built into it, which means that it can expose the PCI Express bus for other purposes. So, for example, Pinebook Pro has a slot in it that you can put one of these NVMe drives into to get really high performance. So the open PCI Express bus on the RK3399 is a really exciting element of that, on top of having high-speed ARM cores for RISC-OS, the USB. It also supports the eMMC technology that I mentioned as well. So any ROCC chip board will have an eMMC slot on it as well. So RK3399 is a very exciting product for RISC-OS, particularly when you consider that sort of anything beyond this kind of level of performance and technology, you start seeing the chips only supporting 64-bit operation in supervisor mode, which basically means that RISC-OS can't make use of those processors. So RK3399 is very much what we feel is king of the hill as far as RISC-OS is concerned for the foreseeable future. Now, what I have here is a new desktop implementation of RK3399. It does have a case. I'm not showing it in a case because I'm going to do something quite fun in a minute. And what we have here is essentially an RK3399 board here with a RAID, a hardware RAID carrier board, so that we can attach multiple SSDs and have them in a RAID array. Basically, I'm using what's called a RAID 1 mirror, where you have two drives and they both get the same data. And if either of the drives dies, the machine will still keep on trucking as if nothing had happened. So if you've got your data on one of these things and your SSD fails or what have you, it does happen, then you haven't lost everything, because the RAID array, you will have a mirror of everything on both drives, and the computer won't bat an eyelid, it'll just continue going. And so what I'm going to do is, here I can quickly load IRIS from the RAID array, it runs much more quickly off the high-speed eMMC, of course, but I want to specifically run it from the RAID array so that you can see that when I pull a hard drive out to simulate a failure, you'll see the computer sort of continues operating as if nothing has happened. So if I now pick this up, and I literally pull out its hard drive, well, solid-state disk, you can see the computer hasn't lost a beat. IRIS continues to work. I've got no internet connection, so it's not going to go anywhere, but you can still see IRIS is working. If I refresh, you can see the SCSI RAID. I can refresh that. Now, obviously, if you'd pulled a hard drive out of a RISC computer, normally that's it, game over until you sort it out. Now, if I put this drive back in again, you won't be able to see, but you can see the light. Well, maybe you can. There's blue lights flashing. That means that it is now automatically detected that it's got a new drive reconnected, and it's now rebuilding it to show any changes that we might have done while the computer was only running in one disk. So essentially, that gives you full data protection against drive failure, etc., with a RAID array. You can also run them as two separate disks if that's more of your cup of tea. But you can see hardware RAID with RISC-OS, and as I say, you've got on this particular one, I've also got a main eMMC drive. And if I load IRIS from the main eMMC drive, you can see that's considerably faster. So basically what we're showing here is RK3399 on the desktop as well as on the laptop, supported by the security of RAID 1 for your data. While I've got this up, I'm now going to, I'm going to be flying across from platform to platform to platform because I've only got 30 minutes remaining and a heck of a lot to cover. So apologies for that. Next thing I'm going to show briefly is a program called CL Filer from Cloverleaf Computers, who we partnered with for the show to show off their program because it's quite nifty. It's developed by programmers in the Ukraine, so it's really RISC-OS under fire, as it were. And basically, these guys have created a filer that basically can go alongside the existing RISC-OS filer to provide more extensive functionality. So you can see down the left-hand side here, we have a tree view of our folder structure, and we can jump to locations around the disk. You can tailor it to have as many of the toolbars or not. So I mean, if I go display and hide all toolbars, it's more like a standard RISC-OS filer. You'll notice that it's got a blue color to the background. That's because I've set it to have a blue color. You can color code any folder that you want, and it will remember that, or we can disable color. I mean, normally it would start disabled, but I'd specified to have a blue coloring. If we then go to, say, not graphic, media, and then images, and then artworks. You can see I told it to have a red color for the artworks. And I'm currently in thumbnail view, so you can see the artworks files have been thumbnailed by the software. We can choose a variety of different graphical modes for the display, large, medium, small, thumbnails, 2D and size bars and size boxes. This is quite a neat feature. If we go to size bars, you can see what's taking how much space with the bars. And if we go to boxes, you can see different sized boxes, again resembling how much space things are taking. Now, if we do this when we've got folders, you can see how much of your hard disk are being used by different folders. So if we go up to media, we can see that video is taking 491 megabytes, images 448, and music 34. So it's an interesting way of seeing your hard disk presented to you. In a way that RISC doesn't traditionally offer. It's very customizable, so you've got keyboard shortcuts. You can alter the keyboard shortcuts to be different styles. You can configure behaviors so that you can drop, if you want to copy things into folders like you do on Windows or Mac, you can just have that kind of behavior. You can have things all in one window, or you can open multiple windows. And one of the neat features that it offers is built-in image previews. So if we go to, say, I keep going to graphics, it's images. I'm sorry, media, there we are. And then images. And then we go to, say, extra backdrops. If I click on this, this is an image preview of this JPEG. And we can then save that in a variety of formats. So we can save it out as Sprite. We've got WebP support, both reading and writing WebP images. It also supports SVG and a couple of other sort of formats that RISC doesn't normally have very good support for. Save as GIF, save as TIFF, save as... So flexible image conversion built into the filer. You've got a file history. If we go there, we can look at the timeline of things that we've visited and things we've done, history of folders, history of files, and history of applications that we've run. Where are we at? So we've covered colors, we've covered sizes, searches. That's pretty cool. I'll leave my keyboard. If you've ever tried using the standard RISC filer searching, you'll know that, frankly, it's almost not worth bothering. It's slow, it's fiddly, it's just generally a pain in the neck. If I want, I'm on the root directory and I've gone into search mode, and if I type iris, boom, that's every occurrence of iris on my hard drive. And so I can click on that, and then it's taken me to iris in my EMMC4 $.network.iris folder. So that's real-time live searching and incredibly fast, as you saw. So, pretty cool. So I'll stop there on it. It's £15. We've got the CDs of the thing. And frankly, I think it's a pretty cool piece of software, especially given, the situation in Ukraine. It's pretty amazing that these guys are continuing able to develop the software in trying times. So, that's CL Filer. Available on the stand on CD, or if you've got a USB stick, we'll put it on a USB stick for you for £15. Okay, so I'm going to shut this one down and move on to the next machine. So it's parking the RAID array there, and then it turns itself off gently. I will stick with RK3399 for a second, and I will switch over to Pinebook. So let me just connect the monitor to Pinebook and run the video software. To use the right keyboard. I've got it here. Okay, so basically Pinebook Pro is top of the line RISC OS portable. Probably, I don't want to jinx things, but my suspicion is that this is going to be the top of the line RISC OS laptop for, well, pretty much all time, depending on how things go 64-bit wise. That basically anything beyond this was 64-bit only, as I mentioned. So as far as the 32-bit ARM processor laptop, I don't think we're going to see anything above and better than Pinebook Pro. So it's a good thing that the Pinebook Pro is a pretty nifty piece of kit. You've seen the RK3399 on the desktop. Well, this is even faster. It's a really swanky bit of kit. I say even faster, about the same. But it runs all your programs, 1080p display, as you can see. So, I mean, it's difficult to know what to say. It does what it says on the tin. The only missing features, really, we've got somebody working on the sound. He's got the DMA engine. There's two parts to the sound, the DMA engine, and actually then, once you can DMA the data into the sound chip, actually getting the sound chip to make the sound. So he's got the DMA engine written, which proved slightly more challenging than he was expecting, but that's now done, and he's in the process of producing. The last thing I heard, he was writing some sort of test code to having DMA'd it in to actually get the data to come out of the sound chip, but that was Thursday. So I'm hoping he has a really productive weekend, is all I'll say. I mean, that's been done by the guy who did the sound for the original Pinebook, so I have every confidence in his ability to get that sorted. You've got 3 USB ports, 2 ordinary USB ports, and a USB-C type connector. You can use all of those from RISC OS to connect peripherals. Decent-sized keyboard, 14-inch 1080p screen, which is much more, if you the old Pinebook had quite a small sort of 11, 12-inch screen. The 14-inch makes a world of difference in terms of readability. Full IPS panel. By default, you've got 64 gig eMMC storage. So that's pretty nippy. We have bought in some 128 gig modules as well. If you feel that 64 gigabytes is a bit on the limiting side. We can dual boot into Linux. There's Wi-Fi, although that's still in progress on RISC OS. The lead programmer for RK3399 is also doing a lot of work on the Wi-Fi stuff. So that's a good sort of link to have in terms of getting things sorted. That's in progress as well. But in the meantime, we've got a USB Ethernet adapter, or you may already have one from the previous Pinebook, etc., so that you can get on the internet. It's a nice bit of kit. I'm just sorry, it's slightly tricky to see the screens. I was going to sort of see if we had a copy of Photodesk, so I could kind of digress onto Photodesk without having to switch systems. Let's see if we go to Show Demo. Do we have Photodesk? We have a zip with Photodesk in, so that will do. What's it saying? Abandoned image tray on the clipboard. Okay, that's fine. I have no idea what that was, but neither does it, so that can go. I normally have the clipboard disabled. The default behavior is not to have things on the clipboard, so I don't know what's going on there. But so basically, long story short, XAT in Holland took over development of Photodesk a couple of years back from CJE. Didn't have a lot of time, so I sort of volunteered to sort of knock it into shape so that it could be back on the market and being sold again, and did various updates along the way. And so XAT said, well, look, Andrew, if you're going to sort of do things with it, then you better look after it and make it available. So it's still their copyright, but we're handling it to keep it going. We've dropped the price quite considerably. It's half the normal RRP, and we have a no-quibble upgrade price of just, I think it's £30 on CD at the show. And one thing we've had done is a completely revamped manual and a brand new quick start guide. Because one of the things people say about Photodesk is that it's a great program, really powerful, but they're not sure how to get the best out of it. So the new manual is very tutorial focused. So if you look up a feature, not only does it tell you about the feature, but it also gives you a worked example. And those example files, they're on the CD as well. So you can actually do the feature yourself with, as the guy explains in the book, and work alongside and learn how to use the program. And then the Quick Start Guide is just a 16-page getting started guide, takes you through some of the common things you might want to do, sort of scaling, resizing images, changing the brightness contrast on an image, cropping an image, those kind of things, as just a sort of quick 16-page worked example to get you familiar with using Photodesk out the box. So basically, it's been tweaked and updated, it's had the copy protection removed, I fixed some long-standing bugs and, various little touch-ups. New documentation, new worked examples, plus example files, and we've axed the price down. So a full copy, I think, is $45 now, rather than being sort of a £90 program. And the upgrade price is $30. We don't ask you to prove your previous ownership. So if you've ever interacted with Photodesk in the past, you can claim the upgrade. So, we've tried to be as sort of decent as we can on that to keep the product alive, and we got copies of that on CD. So, if you're not already in the Photodesk family, it's an affordable product for you to get on board with if you've had it in the past, and you can grab the latest version, and away you go. And then, if you buy the CD version, you'll also get it on Pling Store for download on other systems if you don't have a CD. So, right. So, I'm going to move on from that. I'm going to turn that guy off. And now then, what do we do next? What do we fancy next? Let's look at another new system. You can tell I've been busy, can't you? Okay, so let's look at this guy. This guy's called the Fortissimo and is the latest member of our Forte family. The Forte 2 is still available and offers the sort of entry-level, decent Pi 4-based machine that we offer. This is, well, the name's Fortissimo. If you know anything about music, that means more forte. So that's quite literally what this is. You've still got Pi 4 Heart, but basically it adds really as much as you could possibly imagine to the Pi 4 within rounds of sensibility. So inside here, we have room for 4 SSDs, which can be a mix and match of RISC-OS, Linux, or shared between them. So you can have a Linux SSD, you can have a RISC-OS SSD, you can have a big shared one. There's a 1 terabyte drive in there, not a problem. And maybe a RISC-OS backup drive as well if you wanted to. So you've got a lot of flexibility on drives. This case is kind of sexy, as you probably can see. And this top bit, which is the power button, is also an OLED display. And yes, RISC-OS can use it. So you'll actually have a logo showing the Forte logo when it's running, but that is fully configurable and programmable if you wish. And there's a module that provides an API. Rick Murray in France wrote that, and kudos to him for that. I started writing my own one, and after sort of a couple of days of getting it to display something, I just happened to look online, and I discovered that Rick had already been playing with OLED displays on RISC-OS, and it turns out he'd written a fancy module that was doing rather more than, mine was sort of basic, doing rectangles and the basics. He'd got it all tied into RISC-OS so that you could essentially issue print commands in RISC-OS and it would output to the screen. And of course, if you're a programmer, this is kind of handy because sometimes you'll find with the main desktop, you might get a lockup or a crash. If you output tracing information to the OLED display just by using OLED print command, then if the computer crashes, you'll get out, the current readout will stay on the screen. And even if you reboot the machine, it will stay on the screen until it specifically puts something else on the screen. So, for example, when we restart, we have a thing that just says restarting now, and that will stay all the way through until the point where we put the Forte logo on the reboot. So if you crash, if you're a programmer and you write some debug code to the OLED screen, system crashes, you reboot, you'll still be able to see the results of that debug information to find out how far your program got and what was going on. Of course, there are other crazy things you can do with it. Rick has actually written like a bat and ball game that you can play entirely on the little tiny OLED screen. So, you know, that's a kind of cool feature. There's a fan built into the top, which is fully controllable from RISC-OS, although, frankly, I tend to run it either at 0 or 10% because, frankly, the whole system, the whole metal case acts as a heat sink. There's essentially some metal columns that interface directly onto the CPU and memory, the heat from those gets transferred into the sort of internal chassis. So the hardware runs super cool as it is, so the need for the top fan is pretty much minimal. So 0 or 10% tends to be enough as far as I'm concerned. All clicking along at 2 gigahertz plus makes for a pretty nippy system. I'm just wondering whether it's really worth me powering it up. It looks pretty much exactly like the desktops that I've already shown. So, you know, I think this is one would probably say, with 12 minutes remaining, come to the stand to see this one. You know, RISC-OS or Linux, it runs both. And let's say, you know, you can have four drives on the icon bar. You've got USB and networks and ports and things on the back. It's pretty much as good as it gets as a Pi 4 system, and that's at an affordable price compared to what RISC-OS machines have traditionally cost. And then I will move on to this beastie because I think this one is going to deserve its time in the sun. This is called the Hydra. And if you're a long-time Acorn owner or Acorn follower, that name will ring a bell. Because one of the projects that Acorn did just before they closed the workstation division in the last millennium was to show an expansion board for the RISC PC with 5 strong-arm cards on it. At the time, we thought to ourselves, well, that's really cool, but what can we do with power like that? Of course, it never really came to be because they closed the workstation division, and I think only a few prototypes made it out of Acorn because they didn't really know what to do with it either. But since then, computing has got rather more varied than what we had back in the Acorn day. I'm going to power it on. Let's see if we can get a picture on the projector and things here. I will need to plug in a keyboard and mouse. And basically what we have in Hydra, if I hold it up and you can see some flashing lights, 1, 2, 3, is a motherboard, an ITX motherboard for the Pi Compute module, which contains 6 sockets. And each one of those can take a compute module, which is the brains of a Raspberry Pi, and each one of them is hooked up to an NVMe disk slot. So we've talked about how the NVMe provides high-performance storage. 6 heads, 6 NVMe slots. If I flip the thing over to the back, you'll see a back plate here with screws. I'm not going to take that off. But suffice to say that behind that you see 6 NVMe drive slots for the different heads. So what you've got there is 6 processors, or up to 6 processors. I've got 3 populated in for the demonstration purposes. Each one up to 8 gig of RAM, 4 cores, 2 gigahertz plus, etc. Each one with their own heatsink and cooling. Each one can run its own operating system. You can run RISC-OS, obviously, but you can run Linux. You could run something like an OpenWRT wireless access point. You could run an SSL server if you're into sort of servers and things. You could run a RISC-OS dedicated to 26-bit emulation. You could run there's an operating system called TwisterOS, which allows a compute module to run Windows applications. I will actually show you that because we can run Uniprint on this. And one of my tests yesterday was it detected my printer on my network, so I thought I'll just try running Uniprint on a head. Uniprint ran, it detected the printer, the RISC-OS head, said, oh, Uniprint, hooked it up, saw the printer, hit print on the primary RISC-OS head, boom, out popped the printout on my printer, which had, via Uniprint with no Intel hardware present. So that's a Windows application running on an ARM processor within 2 heads of the Hydra. So let me just sit here for a second and... Yes, I think I configured it for a stupid high resolution for the show stand earlier. Let me just set that to something sensible. My apologies, folks. Let's try 1080p. There's too many modes on this menu. 1920 10, it's very small. It's trying to do 3440 by 1440 on a monitor that is, well, I'd say barely 20 inches. So it was kind of tiny. So that should give us a desktop. Let us select the NVMe drive so you can see the contents of the NVMe drive. So these are just some example files that we will be referencing them later. You can see that Shroud's a movie file that we can just double-click on and watch. Before anybody says anything, this particular movie, Charade, or Charade, or however you want to pronounce it, has the odd property of being completely public domain because they forgot to put a copyright message on it. And this is a time when American law was that if you didn't put a copyright message on, it was deemed to be public domain. So Charade is a completely free movie with big-name actors in. So yeah, you can see that playing happily on the RISC-OS desktop, but we'll see that available also on on our Linux desktop. Now, on the stand, the screen is big enough that this 1080p appears in a window that is sensibly sized. You'll have to forgive me that it's going to fill the whole of the screen for now. But the key thing is Linux in a window on your RISC-OS desktop. This stems from the fact that we had a customer who said to us, Andrew, I'll buy your computers if you can show me, I want to run Linux and RISC-OS. I don't just want to run Linux or RISC-OS. I want Linux and RISC-OS at the same time. So that's what we're doing. This means that we can have programs like LibreOffice running in a window on our RISC-OS desktop. And here is our NVMe drive, and here's, nope, didn't want that one, I missed. Well, that's a PDF file. It doesn't really matter, does it? You can get the idea. I was going for file, open. So you can see that's more than usable speed for running LibreOffice. And once you've got LibreOffice in a window on your RISC-OS desktop, then you've basically got access to full set of Microsoft Office compatibility within your desktop. That also means that we have access to things like Chrome. Again, no internet connection, so I won't try and do anything, but you get the idea. And as I said, if I run Uniprint, you will see that in a moment Uniprint will appear up in this corner. It would normally appear down by the clock on your Windows desktop, but it's just taking a moment the first time it runs because it's loading in the background a sort of Windows compatibility layer. And there is Uniprint, which is a Windows application running in a window. If I click on it, you see that's the Windows Uniprint running in a head on our Hydra, just like a PC card would have done back. Sorry, I was hoping to get outside of this window. Come on, RISC. There we are. Because what I wanted to do was just show that if we run UniControl, which is the RISC front end for Uniprint, if I select drat. It's been doing this quite happily all day, and tonight, this afternoon, it's deciding to make me look stupid. It's the curse of doing a live demo. Basically, all day that's been showing me 0 printers because there are no printers available because I'm not in my home network with my printer. But it's deciding to be awkward, and I don't know why. So let's ignore that for the time being. But as you can see, we can run all sorts of things on different heads and run them in a window. And each one has access to an NVMe drive with shared data. And I'm choosing to share this data between the different heads. Each one can have their own NVMe drive as well as accessing the other ones through sharing. And what that means, these PDF files, the reason that I've got those on there is this is an example PDF form, which on RISC you can't do a lot with. You can see it kind of makes a bit of a mess of the form objects. But what we might want to do is fill in that form. So we can just double click on the example form. And then we can type into our form. We can save that. And here's one I sort of half filled in earlier. You can see I've typed something into there. The point is I've saved a completed form, and if I then wanted to email that one back, we can see that same file here on the RISC desktop. You can see that it's filled in those boxes. Obviously RISC still making a little bit of a pig's ear of it, but that PDF could then be dropped into Messenger Pro or something to email it back to whoever had sent us that thing. And I'm aware I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to stop there to do it. 5 minutes for questions. I will do that. Basically, what I just want to do with this is open your eyes as to what we're capable of with some of these systems. That really the sky's the limit, whether you want to make servers, whether you want to make different heads, whether you just want a home user want to have RISC-OS and Linux, and just have the flexibility that gives you within your own RISC-OS desktop. Hydra, pretty crazy stuff, but pretty cool. And it's expensive, but it's not stupid expensive. So, you could take home, not literally take home, but you could have a Hydra for £750, which when you consider that an Ionics debuted at over 1,000, and even the cheapest I think they sold an Ionics for was $799. So you've got like a multi-headed, many core processor system with NVMe storage and stuff for less than what an Ionics would have cost you, ignoring inflation. It's pretty mind-blowing. So those are some of the projects that we have been up to this quarter. I wonder what we'll find to do with ourselves in the next quarter. So that's it for Andrew rabbiting on. We've covered different hardware. We've covered a couple of software products, Photodesk, CL Filer. Anybody have any questions? There's always one.
It looks as though you've completely confused them.
How many cards does it come with in its default configuration?
The Hydra? I mean, typically I would probably start people with 2. Essentially each head at the current prices, compute modules are crazy expensive at the moment, so the goal is to ram the price down over time once things become available, but on the basis that current prices are what they are. A head is typically somewhere between 100 and 150 pounds for a compute module plus an NVMe drive with an operating system on it. So, not super cheap, but also not crazy expensive either. So, I mean, you could have 6 of those and still pay less than what a RISC PC cost you, for example. I'm not saying you would go. I mean, I would imagine that somebody would start with a 2-headed system, but because I imagine these being machines that we would essentially build to the computer, to the user specification, this is something that I would engage the customer in a conversation with and talk through the possibilities, what we can do with each head, what they want to do with each head. And then work out what's going to be the best kind of specification for you. So, I mean, it may be that the price would be a bit more than $750 once you've sorted out what storage drives and things you want, but it gives you a ballpark for sort of, say, a couple of heads with a couple of NVMe drives, something like that. Yeah. Yep.
Can we buy the bare bones Hydra on its own if we've got our own CM4s?
If you've got your own CM4s, sure. I mean, they're one of the most expensive things to get hold of these days. So yeah, I mean, either you can provide me with the CM4s, or I can just sell you the bare bones and software. Price for that, you'd be probably looking around the £500 price point, but I'd need to go away and do the math on that because it wasn't something that I'd actually thought of. I'm just trying. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the motherboard has a gigabit communication bus internally, as well as 2 external gigabit ports for outside communication, and so each head can communicate through that. So basically, that's what I was using. You could also use RDP. That's on my list of things to do, is to do that. But interesting random fact that while I was playing with this, I was trying VNC with the classic Acorn TCP/IP stack. I was rather dejected because I was only seeing about 3 megasecond transfers through it, which was really not enough to do like video and stuff like that on it. It was a bit disappointing. I installed the RISC Development's TCP/IP stack, and that jumped from 3 megasecond closer to, I think, 25 to 30 range. And that was obviously a huge leap, and it made all the difference. So, you can use YouTube, and I'm not saying you can watch smooth video on YouTube, but you can watch YouTube. It animates frequently enough that you can see what's going on, and it doesn't feel like a complete slideshow. Obviously, it depends how big the things are and everything else. But, I mean, video is not off the cards completely, as you might expect it to be. So, yeah, you can do video things with this. Yeah. I think I'm being told that's all for the... So, computers and stuff.